Hey there folks, Mr. Finley here. This is the Web Productions video on a concept we refer to as mise-en-scène. So what does this mean? Literally, mise-en-scène is French for put in scene, and that's what it refers to. It is anything that is put in the scene. This includes the setting, the location, the props, the costumes that the actors are wearing, the lighting that is used, and the actual performance of the actors. All of these are put into the scene. Basically, creating film comes down to two things: figuring out where to put the camera and then what to point the camera at. And anything that you're pointing the camera at is included in this idea of mise-en-scène, the stuff that we put in the scene. Now, why is this important? Well, this may seem stupid when you first hear it, but if it's in the scene, it's in the scene. Consider that nothing just happens on a film set. Everything is put there for a reason. Every object that's in the scene was placed there by a props master or a assistant, a grip, maybe by a cinematographer. Anything that you see was chosen out of many different possibilities and put there. And therefore every object has some sort of meaning. Nothing happens by accident, or if it does happen by accident, that's not ideal. Consider the scene that you have there on screen from the 2010 remake of True Grit. This looks like a pretty natural scene, right? We've got three people riding horses through the outdoors. But even in this scene that doesn't seem to be staged in any way, everything that you see there was chosen. Each of those three horses was chosen out of many potential horses and matched up for their character. The fact that it's snowy and in the desert, they didn't just happen to say, oh, it's snowy today, let's film today. They said this scene is supposed to be at one of the darker points in the movie, where things are most desolate. There wants to be snow on the ground, and so they waited and shot when there actually was snow on the ground. In other cases, they may have, with other film that requires snow, they may have actually used fake snow. But they didn't just say, "Oh, it's snowy out today. Let's film it." That was a choice, and the fact that it was snow has both a emotional connotation. It's cold, it's bleak, and it also has a visual connotation. Notice the way that it makes the characters and their horses pop up against that. Even small details, like the fact that the Matt Damon character, who was on the middle horse there, his bedroll is that bright red, whereas everyone else is in the sort of muted brown and black. His character is a bit more over the top and extreme than the others, and therefore it makes sense that his bedroll would be more brightly colored. Also, if you look at the coat of the young woman on the back horse, you'll notice that that coat is too large for her. That's not because the prop master couldn't find a coat that would fit. It's because it's implied that that was actually her father's coat, and she's in this movie trying to get revenge for her father's death. So the fact that she is constantly wearing his oversized coat and hat, a man's coat and hat, is a symbol for the job that she's taken on. We'll talk more about symbols later. But as you see, even in this scene that appears to be pretty natural and unstaged, everything is chosen to be there. And it's chosen to be there because every single detail means something. In this fairly famous scene from Star Wars, you'll notice there's a lot of stuff going on, and every single thing has some sort of meaning. The most obvious sort of meaning that an object in the scene can have is the implication to the plot. So the fact here that Darth Vader has a lightsaber, though you don't see it out right now, that is a real threat to Luke, who's clinging onto the side there. So implication simply means that there's something plot-wise that a given element might suggest. The fact that Luke is hanging out over this vast pit and could fall at any moment. But there are other ways that the elements in a scene can give us information. One of them is color. And this is a great example. Luke, throughout this whole movie, wears white and shades of white because he is the hero. Darth Vader is only ever seen in black because he is the villain. Color means something. Position means something. In this scene, we see Darth Vader up close, and Luke is further into the scene, putting him at a disadvantage, making him smaller, literally, than Darth Vader, making Darth Vader seem more powerful. Also, this is a great example, by the way, if you draw that grid on top of it, of rule of three composition. You see both of those figures are right where those lines are that divide the scene into thirds. Scale is also something that carries meaning. We see these two people in the scene, but then the background of the scene, which of course is part of the mise-en-scène, gives a sense of scale, that they're part of this much, much larger structure, that if he falls, he would fall miles to his death. So the background is part of it, and part of the information it gives is the scale of the scene. The lighting carries meaning. The lighting in the scene is both from below and from above, which gives it a very harsh look in the scene. And of course, gesture. Acting is part of the mise-en-scène, and therefore the gestures that are captured in this scene have meaning. The fact that you have Darth Vader reaching out to Luke, the fact that Luke is clinging on for dear life to this structure. All of those elements are part of this scene, and if you took away any one of them, the backdrop or the lighting, the relative position of them, the shot would mean something different. So when you're creating a shot, you need to not only figure out what am I putting in this scene, but what does each thing mean. A great way to look at this is to compare different shots. These are the two famous dinner table scenes from the movie American Beauty. And you'll notice that one is near the beginning of the film, one's near the end of the film, and some subtle changes have taken place, even though they're very similar. Again, everything in the scene was put there. And so you have to ask, okay, well, what does it mean? Looking at the upper left image, this is the first time we see it, notice everything is very balanced. It's very classical. It's symmetrical. The left and the right parts of the frame are very much the same. Everything is very precise. And this gives a sense of the very precise, very almost prison-like household that these characters live in. It's very lovely. Everything is, cut crystal and hardwood, and everyone's wearing nice clothes. So it gives us information about these people, that they're certainly, upper middle class. But at the same time, the structure of it suggests a coldness to it and a precision, and also the way that it is lit, and also the colors, those blues and those grays, suggest a coldness. But if you notice, at the very center, at the very heart of that image, are those red roses, which are a symbol that keep cropping up over the course of the entire film, and suggest that at the heart of these people's lives there is something fiery and alive. Compare that with the other shot, same dinner table, but it's a little bit different. We now see the characters have changed. That fire has gone out in their lives. There's no longer those red roses in the center. And you'll see that the Kevin Spacey character at the right end of the table is no longer wearing his sort of very precise business-like sweater, but now he is in a sort of ratty shirt, and he's got a bottle of beer there, and that suggests the change that has taken place in his character. We understand the change not just because of how he behaves and how he acts, but because of the mise-en-scène, the various things in the scene that have changed. Keep in mind, by the way, that acting is part of the mise-en-scène. If you were to look at this famous shot from The Matrix, we see all kinds of great things in this. We see the props in the background that tell us something about where they are. It's clearly somewhat run down. That chair that Morpheus is sitting on has a number of stains on it. It's very dusty. It's not just they couldn't get a nice chair, it's that they wanted to show a world that was in decay, and so you've got those details. But also, and also that's contrasted with the very slick, clearly very expensive leather garb that he has and his mirrored shades and all of those elements. But remember that the performance is part of this as well. It wouldn't be Morpheus in The Matrix if it weren't for Samuel L. Jackson. The other thing to keep in mind about the various images you have is they can give the audience information about where we are and who these characters are, but they can also convey symbolic information. An object can represent something else. If it does that, that makes it a symbol. And if it's part of the larger thing it's representing, we have a fancy word for it. We call it a metonym. And the great thing about a metonym is that you can do things to it that you physically that you can't do to the idea that it stands for. So for example, you might have a statue, and that statue is a metonym for the government that it represents. Now when you overthrow a government, well, you can't really see that. But what you could do is you could tear down the statue. And because the statue visually represents that bigger idea, what we see when you pull down the statue is symbolically you pulling down the government. This is useful because you can do it on film. You can have an object, a symbol, a metonym for something else, and we understand that when you do something physical to that thing, you're doing it to the larger idea that you can't maybe put on film. A great example of this in the film The Devil Wears Prada that you see there, you've got a metonym, which is the protagonist's cell phone, which she's always receiving calls from her horrible, evil, devil-like Meryl Streep boss. And so the phone is part of this larger relationship and becomes a symbol of this horrible, destructive relationship she has with this boss. And at the end of the film, when she finally decides, she's going to quit this job and get away from her horrible boss, she throws the phone into a fountain in Paris. And we see in that gesture that what she's doing, she's throwing that whole relationship away. Now, you can't physically throw a relationship, but you can throw a metonym. So that's one of the values of a metonym or a symbol. And that, again, is part of the mise-en-scène, the stuff you put in